G'day everyone, I'm Ross from the Composite Shop and welcome to episode 8 of our mega composite surf kayak build. This is a carbon fibre reinforced surf wave machine that I build here. We've got about 9 different models and we do a number of sea kayaks as well. Basically this episode I'm going to be concentrating on putting that external seam that really makes this boat stand out. We've got all the colour and we've got all the construction. We now need to make it really look fantastic and protect that external seam. So lots of work in this one, lots of sanding, lots of very careful detail, and there's quite a lot of information in this. This is building into quite a comprehensive video series. I've done a lot of time lapses to try to make it a little bit easier on you. Thanks for joining me. Don't forget to subscribe and pop over to Life on the Hulls if you haven't already had a look at that. That's our 40-foot catamaran build that we're building here in our factory complex here. And there's 113 odd episodes of a complete composite foam core catamaran build to date. So thanks for joining me and let's get into it. Preparing to do the seams of these kayaks, I'm actually doing an external seam. It's a 12mm braided glass tape that I put on the edge of these kayaks. I used to use Kevlar, I've used carbon seams. It depends on what the customer orders, but in this case we use it's actually a double thickness braided tape. It's almost like a tube, but we flatten it out and we embed it in resin onto the side of the kayak. Now the problem with that is I've got 2 surfaces where the hull and the deck have met, and they're very glossy and they're very shiny because it's gel coat, so I need to remove that, and the preparation takes a bit of time. It takes a good hour or so to prepare each side of this kayak along this seam line here to make sure that I'm getting the perfect bond of the resin back to the material. So I'll mount the kayak up on its side like so, and notice that my stands are all padded with bubble wrap so that I don't scratch the surface. And then I'll start at the bow, and I need to make a 25mm or a sort of 20 to 25mm or 1-inch seam line, and you become pretty good at doing stuff by eye, but I'll mask the edge like so. By masking it, I'm giving myself an area that I can now sand without damaging the surrounding surface. Find when I'm masking too, the longer the tape, the more accurate I am. If I try to do short sections at a time, you'll end up with a couple of little bumps in it. Here where I've already taped and done the other side, so it takes a little bit of adjustment to get this right. Now I will always double tape, because when I'm sanding I can easily go across the top of that masking tape and scratch the surface of my product. It's just my insurance that I'm not going to scratch the nice surface up here. All I'm interested in is this part here. I don't know whether you can see it, but it's actually dull here. We've already sanded the other side, so I'm just going to match that surface there at the beginning and then bring it around just like I did on the other side. I've mated it there with the other side that I've already sanded, so you know, that's a nice neat seam. Now along here, because the boat was on its side when I put the internal seam on and I had this tape, there's all these little bumps and raised sections here where it's come out of the mould, and all these little sections that need to be removed. Now this needs to be dulled right off, and I use a 60 grit at this stage, which gives me that really good scuffed up surface, but I need to remove all these small remnants of resin because they won't allow the resin to stick to the outside of the boat. Any sort of chunks of resin and bits of debris that I might have left over from the seaming process and excesses on the mould need to be physically removed before I can start to put a seam on. So I get a block sander, and I've tried all types of machinery to remove this, and I'm better off with a block sander. And throughout the series, you're going to see me using a number of different stands and props and things that I've sort of worked out and designed and built over the years to make the ergonomics of making these kayaks a lot easier for myself. We used to have to think about the heights, all of that sort of stuff. And one thing that you'll always see is I'll always have padding on every single stand that I have. There's nothing worse than getting a beautiful boat made and then scratching it right at the end because you've got a stand that doesn't have enough adequate padding on it. So you'll notice here, this board here that I've made is covered in foam. I keep these replaced quite regularly because it only needs to get a drop of gel coat on it, and then that could scratch your next product, and ultimately you're just going to end up in a cycle of having to do restorative repair rather than getting on with the job of making something nice. You'll also notice too that this is what I call my seaming board. This is where I'll sit my surf kayaks, and each product that I make has its own sort of jigs and stands that I use to make that life a lot easier. I need to elevate it above these normal stands so that I can get the seam in underneath. No point in having something sitting on a flat bar like that and having to actually work around a bar. I've got it high so I can get underneath it. And I'm going to seam that kayak now and show you the process that I go through to do that. All right, so the process starts by giving it a really good clean. I need to clean it with that old methylated spirits and clean the seam and the surrounding gel coat to make sure that my masking tape for the seaming process is going to stick or adhere correctly to it. It is a little bit of a long process putting a seam on, but the great thing about it is once you put it on, it almost pops the whole product and makes it really look beautiful. So again, I've got it up high here, so I've got an area here where I can actually get underneath. There's no point in me having a sitting down on a stand here when I need to actually paint along this line here. So first thing I'll do is turn him over, and another great reason for having padding on all of my surfaces. And I'll get it into this position and I'll start the cleaning process. Okay, so now that I've cleaned that and I've just wiped all that residue off, I now need to find the sanded area and remask it. And I need to remask it with 2 layers of masking tape, and that can be a little bit hard to see on a white surface. So always make sure you've got adequate lighting that can allow you to see where your lines are. And it is a little bit hard to see on this particular boat today. What I'll do is I'll start that and I'll have a little twiddle of my masking tape there. And then I can pretty much just mask it as I did earlier. This is where you need to be pretty much dead accurate. If you don't want your seam going on an area that hasn't been sanded. So I'm just going to show you how this looks. It's basically two pieces of masking tape on top of each other, slightly overlapping, and right along the seam that I've prepared. Now you'll notice up here, I've got these little remnants sticking up. That means when I come to peel this away, and I've got all the resin and the seam on here, I'm going to be able to peel it away. I'm going to be able to grab that and just continue to pull it away. Always leave yourself with a little tag. So that's side one, that's side two. I can grab it with an ungloved hand and pull it away with a minimum of fuss. Okay, so I do both sides, and then I'll flip the boat over and I'll do the other side and get it masked up, and then I'm ready to basically start cutting the seam, getting it ready, preparing my resin. I always start at the end, not in the middle. And there's a good reason why I do that, because I'll be seaming it from here around so that the sort of the join in the seam will be right at the back and not visible from the front, and I can sort of hide it back here. You'd never start a seam from the front, because then you have a big lump on the front where it doubles up. Okay, you might wonder why I double mask it. I'm about to be brushing on a whole heap of gel coats, black gel coats. I don't want it splattering all over here, although because this is a polished wax surface, it's going to chip off, but I hate the cleanup. So this way I can almost remove all my debris and any sort of splatter just on the masking tape. The other thing I do too is when I make these kayaks, we all have our little rituals. And this particular boat can be a little bit of a challenge to seam, and I've got a couple of little things that I do. So what I'll do is I'll go around, I'll put some tape here, and I'll just leave that hanging for a minute, and here. And I have a reason for this. All the way around, about every foot or so. And I'll do this with a sea kayak, a canoe, anything that I'm putting a seam on, a tank, a water tank, anything that I'm making. And I have a very good reason for doing it. This is totally prepared now for a seam. Now if you look here, I've got a double lined masking tape seam on top and bottom. And my little tabs there are there to hold the seam in place while I get the exact amount that I need. Now it does actually have a stretch to it, so by taping it on I can sort of ensure that it's going to get a good fit. And the tape that I use is actually this. Looks like a 15mm flat braid glass tape, and it's quite an interesting product. It's around about 12 to 15 millimeters wide, but as you put tension on it, it will actually compress. I want around a 12 millimeter seam on this boat, plus about another 3 or 4 millimeters on each side. I generally aim for around about an 18 millimeter total seam width. But this stuff is actually, it's almost like, it is actually made of fiberglass, but it is actually a braided material rather than a cloth, and it's a lot stronger and will handle impact a lot better. It won't shatter like a glass seam will. So if he hits a rock or something, or hits another boat, or a surfboard hits him, which is quite likely in a surf environment, this is going to handle that impact. Okay, so the first thing I've got to do is find the start point, and that's generally on the stern here. So I use this start point right here in the center, and I'll overlap my seam by around about an inch. And you'll see why I have these little tabs here. Now I have that there, and I'll then tab it in place. I don't want to interrupt my masking for my paint line on my gel coat line, but I do want to make sure it holds in place to make sure that as I tension this around, I'm getting the correct width. As you can see, it's actually thinning out just by tensioning it, and I'll follow the line, the center line of the boat, until I get this seam perfectly situated. I'll sort of give it a light rub to make sure that I'm getting all the weave in the correct direction. And as I tension it around, I'm trying to find that center point that's going to look nice on the boat. Now what I'm actually trying to do here is by sort of rubbing it on, I'm shaping it almost to the shape of the boat. Because a lot of these weaves, when they're wrapped around a spool like so, will actually touch out of shape. So the trick is to try to get it to fit the boat properly. So by taping it down and just tacking it down, I'm making sure that I've got the exact amount of length. I don't want to get to the other end and find that it's like 2 inches short or 5 inches overlapped. That's just a waste of materials, and it's not a very easy thing to do when you're covered in gel coat and you're trying to trim something that should have been done in the first place. I'm going to come up around the bow here, and it starts to get a little bit awkward as you get up around the bow here, because what it wants to do is slide up and over the top. So now I've got that tensioned all the way around, or just sitting in place. I can now find my end point, which is around about here. There's always a chance to trim it at the end, but once it's covered in black gel coat, this is not going to look great. So we're going to basically snip that off, and I can now get rid of my spool and put it safely away so that it's not going to get covered in it. So you now see that I've actually trimmed the end, and I'm going to be able to make that lay down nice and flat there for a nice finish at the end. Now the seam that I'm working on would stand to reason it's going to be black. You can put any colour you like as long as it's mixed gel coat. The thing with this boat is the black, with the black coaming, with the black splatter, with the black thigh braces and the black seam really sets it off in amongst all of that yellow as the base colour. So the one thing I like too about using these base colours is that black is very easy to match. If I put a green seam on it in three years time, when the guy does a big chunk out of it, he's going to have trouble matching that colour and pretty much going to have to do the whole seam again to make that boat look fantastic again. But gotta love black. It tends to go with everything. It is also very slimming because I need it. But yeah, so I get my black gel coat. Now the process is I'm going to have 2 cups of gel coat, one of which is gel coat, the second of which is flow coat. And the flow coat needs to go on in the second layer, so it's a little bit of a process. It needs to be done extremely quickly. You need to almost have this done within about 15 minutes. It's a 15-minute process, and the reason why is that gel is going off on top of gel. So I've got a catalyzed mixture already, and then another catalyzed mixture of flow coat, which is going to go on directly on top of it, which will then fill all the fibers of the glass tape. And essentially, then once that's starting to catalyze, that wax is going in the flow coat will rise to the surface and give me that beautiful shiny finish and a tack-free surface, and the job will be finished. Then I need to immediately remove the masking tape. So there's no mucking about with this job. 2 cups of gel coat. In fact, we don't need full cups for a boat of this size. I'm probably only going to need around about 100 mils of milliliters of, or 100 grams of gel coat in each cup. So I'll pour that out. Now remembering, gel coat is for placing within the mold and then laminating over the top, and then when it's set, pull it out, you got a beautiful shiny surface such as we have here on our surf kayak. On this guy here, beautiful and shiny, that's gel coat. Flow coat is the waxed added gel coat that actually rises to the surface and therefore acts like a mold and starves the gel coat underneath of oxygen, which allows it to set and allows it to harden and protects it and waterproofs it and all those things that we want to happen with gel coat. But because if I put gel coat straight on here as the outer layer, it's going to be tacky. There's dust going to stick to it every time I wipe it with a rag. It's going to get lint on it. It's going to look like shit, and it's not going to polish up properly. So we have to make flow coat. You can buy flow coat, but I make it once again, you can add up to 30% of the volume of the resin with a wax in styrene additive. So this is 1 litre here of 5% wax in a styrene carrier. So the styrene is the monomer, the styrene monomer is the chemical that the paraffin wax is added to, and that wax will float. Now, it's nice and warm in here today. It's 22 degrees in here today. It's beautiful. It's fairly early morning. In winter, you'll see the wax will actually almost coagulate inside here. So I just sit this in a jug of warm water, not boiling water, but warm water, just to melt the wax back into solution, and then I give it a bit of a shake. Now, if I'd have come here, 3 or 4 months ago when it was 10 degrees in here in the morning, and I was trying to use this, not going to happen. I need to sit it in warm water and let it soak back into solution. So that's a tip. If you ever see wax inside your wax and styrene trying to make flow coat, put it in a warm bowl for about 10 minutes. Honestly, it'll join the styrene and become a perfect mixture again. So I'm going to add around about, in this 100 mils here, I'm only going to add 15 mils of flow coat, of wax. So there's a little bit of, you can see it, I don't know whether you can see it in there, you can see it there. Okay, that has to be mixed in thoroughly. And what I do at this stage is I move my gel coat right up here, out of the way. And I'm going to leave a stick in this flow coat so that I don't get them mixed up. I don't want this going on first, because then my gel coat goes on second. Big mistake, I'm going to end up with that tacky surface again. We want the flow coat on second. So I've added my wax. Get that out of the way. Give it a good stir. And incorporate that into the resin. Question, I've got 100 mils of gel coat. I want to catalyze it at 1.5%, so it's nice and slow. I've now got 120 mils of waxed resin here. At what level do I catalyze it? So anyone that said we catalyze to the 1.2 or 120 mil volume of resin here is wrong. You catalyze to the resin only to the resin, not to the waxed added resin. And that's another way that a lot of people get caught out. They'll have a bucket full of flow coat, they'll flow coat it, they'll catalyze it to 1.5% of the actual added volume, and all of a sudden you've got flow coat setting off too quickly and not enough time to complete your job. Alright, the way I know that is now flow coat, it's going to live right over there. My gel coat's going to live here, and I'm almost ready to do this seam. So now I've done that and I've prepared all of this, I need to now remove these tapes, but I won't take them away altogether because I may need them later on. I'm going to leave this frontish one on here, like so, just lightly, and then I'll take all of these ones off. I know my length of my tape's correct, and I'll just tape them here, up above my other line. I may find with gravity that I might need to just tack this on while I put the first coat of gel coat on. So I'll go around, move all of these, and then I'll let the tape just dangle there on my stand. Same deal on this side. There to go. I'm basically going to start at the nose and work that way, and then start at the nose and work that way. I won't start at the end and work my way around, because what will happen is I'll actually end up, what I want to do is tension it towards the back rather than bunch it up towards the front. So if I start at the nose and work that way, I tend to find that I get a really nice result and that slight overlap at the other end, which is what I'm aiming for. Now, because I'm applying a 25 mil wide seam maximum, we're gonna have to use a 25 mil brush. I used to do it with a 50 mil brush, and I'd have the stuff absolutely everywhere, but this brush enables me to to sort of stipple the gel coat on really gently without making too much of a mess. Imagine gel coat is a thickened resin, and being a thickened resin, as you start to fill up a brush, it's going to make this brush around 50 mil wide. So a 50 mil wide one's going to like almost double in size by the time it's full of resin. So a thin brush like this makes a massive difference when you're putting on a thin seam. On some of the sea kayaks, we do a slightly thicker seam. You'll probably notice that a lot of companies do actually spray their seams. I've done that in the past. It does require a lot of prep. You essentially have to plastic coat the hull and the deck with a plastic bag, just like you'd be spraying a car, and then allow the overspray to land on that. And yeah, it's a hell of an effort to spray them. And some of the boats like Seaward Kayaks in Canada, the finish on their seams is second to none. I've watched Jeff and the guys over there and Cliff do those seams, and they're just amazing, the quality of them. With my boats, I find the brush is pretty effective. It does give a bit of a textured finish, but I don't actually mind that. You can actually roll it with a foam roller if you want to, but I find the brush on this boat pretty much gives me a great result. So with my resin catalyzed, you'll notice here that I actually carefully stipple that resin along the center line of the seam, equidistant between the two masking tape lines. And the reason why I do that is so that I can actually apply adequate material there to sink the cloth tape into the resin and make sure that I get enough there to firstly hold it in place, and secondly to wet it out adequately. If I were to just simply brush the black gel coat on, it would be very hard to determine where the top and the bottom masking lines are, and therefore I could easily put the tape or the cloth tape across the top of the masking tape line, and then when I pull the masking tape off, I could very, very easily pull off the cloth tape at the same time. And that has happened to me in the past, and this is where you learn these little techniques, is usually by making a lot of mistakes. But it's then a point of putting the cloth on. You actually then stipple the cloth into the material that's already there on the boat, and what that does is actually ensures that it's getting wetted out thoroughly, and then ultimately you can simply brush over the top with the remaining gel coat. It's then a matter of then getting the flow coat and brushing it over and putting a slightly more liquid coating over the top to get that really nice finish that I'm aiming for.
So one thing you'll notice is that I'm actually leaving a lot of little yellow bits here in the between the tape and my gel coat, and that's so I can see that I've got my seam equal distance away from the gel line. So it's very important that I didn't just blacken this right out. I wouldn't be able to see the edge of my masking tape. It's just enough to give me a guide to put all the masking tape. I can actually see the edge of it, and I know that my seam's going to be equal all the way around.
Once the cloth's in place and I get round to the stern of the kayak there, I'm actually overlaying it and very carefully blending those braids in. Now there'll always be an overlap and a slight lump there, but you can pretty much get it pretty nicely incorporated together.
Well, now onto our flow coat, 1.5%. So this is our waxed resin, and this is going to rise to the surface and waterproof and totally seal that gel coat underneath.
So it's at this point that you have to sort of start to work reasonably quickly, remembering that you have that gel coat underneath starting to gel at around about 10 or 12 minutes, and then the flow coat is being applied reasonably quickly, and long, slow brush strokes will give the best result. While doing that, the actual wax will start to flow to the surface, and although it's on a vertical surface, gel coat will keep a good vertical hold. Unlike a lot of other paints, it will hold itself because it has a certain thickness that will give it that ability to hang in a vertical situation. But the wax rising to the surface gives you a beautiful shiny finish, And ultimately, the only thing you really need to do then is perhaps polish it at the end of the job. So it's time to remove the seam. Take your gloves off and just try to pull it away without getting it all over you. I take the top one off first and then the bottom one underneath. So what I'll do is I'll grab my little twiddled end here and always pulling towards the gel coat. It's always given me a brilliant result. There's something very cathartic about removing masking tape, particularly when you reveal a line that's as neat as that. And I'll show you what I'm talking about. Get out of your way here. Look at that, and that is just perfect. It's important that you've got to be careful you don't catch anything on top of these things as you pull them away. Now that tiny little bit there, I'm going to wipe off. That's just where the tape had doubled up. Invariably, you can get it almost perfect. A little clean up here, little clean up here, tiny little clean up here, and I'll get the rest of that in a minute. I guess it needs to be said, there are many ways to do a seam like this. There are so many ways that I can think of, you know, spraying, different types of roller arrangements, but I get a brilliant finish and I'm so happy with the finish. It is a slight textured finish. But you know, that's about an hour away from being able to work on again, and that's pretty much done in one sitting. A lot of guys will do a seam, then they'll sand it, and then they'll do it again, and then they'll sand it. I can pretty much get, you know, almost perfect finish. You know, you can still see a little bit of the braid, but you know, that's what makes a product like this. It's a handmade product, and you know, Des is going to be pretty happy with this guy when it arrives in WA. So yep, pretty happy with that. Yeah, but look at that. It's a pretty sensational finish for around about half an hour of seaming work. Let's really set this product off, I think you'll agree.